Solomon Islands is part of a region that has inspired many movies and books. This part of the world was at the center of Cold War intrigue between the US and the Soviet Union when both the countries were exploring bombs in South Pacific, especially in the areas where they had atolls, where they were experimenting with the nuclear weapons. But once again, this part of the world is in attention because of the strategic competition between China and the US, where they are vying for control in this part of the world. US and Australia are concerned about the pact that Solomon Islands has signed with China. This is a simple pact which just says that they will cooperate on security issues. It does not allow China to set up a base in Solomon Islands. But US and UK and other countries believe that the pact could open the prospects of a future base in the region. And this part of the world is important because it's part of US's second island strategy. The island of Guam is very close to the Solomon Islands, which is part of the second island chain. And that island chain is important to contain China's access to the US, and that's how US has planned its strategy in terms of containing China. But what has really pushed this agreement across the line is one of the protests that started in 2021 on the Melita Island. That's one of the most populous provinces of Solomon Islands, where the Chinese businesses were targeted by the Melita residents. And some of the Solomon Islands people believe that it was the outside forces, which could be the US, Australia, which were really behind the protests, and they were targeting the Chinese businesses. But the protest itself allowed China to open the discussions and eventually close the negotiations and sign this agreement, which was signed between Wang Yi and Solomon Islands' foreign minister. And therefore, the protest became a rationale for the Chinese to justify their security agreement with Solomon Islands. And the Chinese police are now training the local police in riot management and other things. In the grand geopolitical sense, we have focused on Taiwan for a long time, but we should also keep an eye on South Pacific, which is becoming contested space where both China, US, as well as somewhat Australia are trying to influence the local leaders and seek new agreements which will allow them to project power. And therefore these local prime ministers or presidents in islands like Kiribati or Vanuatu will have to negotiate with the great powers.